Let's get into the introductions and introduce our 5 panelists for tonight, all of whom have a connection to the CABJ in the past. Michelle, still very much in the present. So we'll start with Angela Lawrence, who is the founding president of the CABJ. She was also on the launch committee and then sat on the board from 1996 to 1999. A former magazine editor and marketing executive, Angela Lawrence is a creative leader with a proven track record of innovation in publishing, advertising, and brand strategy. Today, in addition to her responsibilities as Chief Culture Officer at Gusto 54 Restaurant Group, Angela oversees the success of Chubby's Jamaican Kitchen, the restaurant she co-launched in 2017. Her passion for Jamaican culture can also be seen with Cook Like a Jamaican, the popular blog and YouTube channel she co-founded with her mother. Angela, thank you so much for being with us this evening.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right, so Hamlin Grange, who I call on, I think, a lot for advice these days, but Hamlin Grange is also the former president and vice president of the CABJ. He's been a reporter, producer, interviewer, and news anchor at CBC Television, Global News, TVO, and the Toronto Star. Today, he is president and principal consultant with DiversiPro, a diversity and inclusion management consulting firm based in Toronto. He's a very busy guy, but we very much appreciate him being with us this evening. So thanks, Hamlin.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. It's great.
All right, we had Morgan Campbell with us, but I think we just lost him. So I'll introduce him. Hopefully he'll rejoin us. Morgan Campbell, so many of you probably know him from his work on the Toronto Star, a veteran journalist whose work focuses on the intersections of sports, race, politics, and business. He is a TEDx lecturer, a regular contributor to CBC Radio, and a past winner of the National Newspaper Award for sports writing. After 18 years at the Toronto Star, Campbell left the daily news business to work on his first book. Okay, so hopefully he'll rejoin us, and I'll move on to just introducing Michelle, who is also a former president of the Canadian Association of Black Journalists. Most recently, she's been part of our transition team. She currently serves as our advisor. She also served from 2008 to 2011 with the CABJ as vice president for broadcast and president of the CABJ as well. She was very successful in being part of the team that welcomed the NABJ, the National Association of Black Journalists, based in the US. She welcomed them up here for their first ever international board meeting in 2010. She has over 20 years of communications and broadcasting experience with several leading organizations. Her time in media at the CBC, and in particular Rogers, served to build, support, and mentor young and upcoming journalists, many of whom are actively working in media in Toronto, across Canada, and in the United States even today. So Michelle, thank you so much for being here and for being part of this whole journey, which you have been ever since 2016 when I reached out to you. Yes. And ever since 2016.
My pleasure.
I know, it's been a journey. When I reached out to you and told you that I really felt strongly that we needed to see the CABJ relaunched. And since then, Michelle has been instrumental in helping to get this organization up and running and helping to pull the team together that's been working behind the scenes, now very much in front of the scenes in leading the charge in the CABJ. But for those of you who are our panelists tonight, you know that there's nothing new about the CABJ. There's also probably not a lot new about the conversations that we're having today, but we'll get into that. But there's an entire generation of journalists who just are not familiar with the work of this organization, how long it's been around, its legacy, its history. And this is important as we talk about this industry, but especially when we consider where we are today, because the CABJ has always had a voice in this industry, and it's important, I think, to recognize that. So I really want to start with Hamlin and Angela. If you can kind of take us, way back in the day, maybe Angela, we'll start with you. Back when you were having these conversations, you and the founding team were having these conversations about launching the CABJ, can you paint a picture for us of what the industry was like back then, why you felt like you needed an organization like this?
I think that, and it's funny, I was just showing you that I found this copy of the Ryerson Review of Journalism that actually tells our story. about why we felt the need to launch an association to bring, you know, journalists and communicators together, Black journalists and communicators together. But how the story starts is very true. So when you read the article, and I know there's a link on the website, which is that I was watching it was on TVO, and it was a room full of journalism students, and there was a Toronto Sun columnist who was talking about, you know, the fact that the reason why the newsrooms are not diverse is because there's no people of color to hire. Like, they're not in the journalism schools, they're not out there, and so on and so forth. And I was sitting there, I was at the time was a magazine editor working for a large company, which was Transcontinental Media, on a national publication, even though I knew that there were, I think, 2 or 3 other Black editors at the company. And I knew a lot of other people. And so I'm like, there are people out there. And I thought it would make a really big difference if we could just come together for the purposes of networking and also of advocating. And also making it easy for the industry so that they couldn't use that as an excuse not to hire more people, more Black journalists, more people of color. So I reached out to some of the veteran journalists out there. I believe the first person I reached out to was Hamlin. And the reason I reached out to Hamlin was because I had heard about a group, maybe like quite a few years earlier, a group of Black journalists in Toronto who had gone together for dinner. And the whole discussion was, you know, how can we maybe create an association? And so I called him to find out whatever happened to that. And so when I explained to him what we wanted to do, you know, we're all these young little upstarts, and you know, we want to do something. We want to see how we can bring everybody together. He's like, if you guys want to move forward with it, you know, I will definitely help you. I'll get involved. And so we decided to start a steering committee. And the first thing was we agreed that there would be no need to recreate the wheel. And so we looked to to the south, to the NABJ, the National Association of Black Journalists. We looked to them to see what their governance looked like, what their bylaws look like. And we just kind of started from there. We leveraged a lot of things from there, and also created a relationship with the NABJ to the degree that they sent a representative to our launch event in 1996.
Hamlin, when Angela reached out to you, you know, to talk about the launch of this organization, first of all, what were you experiencing in the industry? What were you seeing?
It's really interesting, Angela. You sort of triggered some memories for me when you talked about that meeting that we had, and it's kind of a legendary joke that we at the time we were able to around a table at the Underground Railroad restaurant, we were able to have pretty much all the known Black journalists working in mainstream, the Black media, in news and current affairs around that one table. That's how small it was. And so when I got the call from Angela, it was all right. You know, finally, I'm gonna get some help to do this. And Angela's passion was just palpable over the phone. And I could tell that if this was an opportunity to do this, this was gonna happen. And so it was a really welcome opportunity. What was going on in the industry at the time, in the media industry? A lot of things. I mean, you know, the coverage of our community was skewed, meaning that it was unfair, inaccurate, unbalanced, because our people, our reporters that were covering our community, they simply did not understand our lived experience. The editors were making no decision as to what stories get covered, did not understand. Things that were being published in the daily newspapers and on television, not just inaccurate, but they were racist. And we felt that we needed to do something about it. We needed to have an answer to that. Apart from Contrast newspaper, the weekly Black community newspaper, there was no other voice for Black journalists to express themselves, to do their craft. there were some people working in the mainstream media at the time, but a lot of those folks were underground. You didn't even know that they were even there because you saw a byline, didn't know who these people were. Malcolm Johnson comes to mind for me. He was at the Toronto Star for many years. But you never knew this guy was Black, and he deliberately kept under the radar for a whole bunch of reasons. And we talked about that when I went to the Toronto Star and joined him years later. So that what was going on. The community felt it was undercovered, misunderstood, and journalists wanted to get into business as far as they were concerned. Nobody wanted to talk to them. So that was the atmosphere that we started the CABJ. And I'll tell you, we had a lot of pushback. There were white journalists, columns written in the Toronto Sun, for example, were saying things like it was calling it reverse racism. Why do you need a Black association? Why don't you have a journalism association already, Canadian Journalists Association. Why not join that? And it was really, we went on the defense. We were constantly having to explain ourselves as to why we needed an association that could create a network and celebrate excellence among Black journalists in this country. It was an uphill battle, but we persevered and we did a lot of interesting things.
Hamlin and Angela, maybe you can both speak to this. When you talk about the uphill battle, so yes, there was that resistance from other columnists and writers within newsrooms. What about leadership? How did they respond to the CABJ?
Well, it was a mixed bag, to be honest with you. I think we did have meetings with some of the leadership. Not all newspapers or media folks got on board. I think later on when we started doing, we had our annual event. We started to attract more of these leaders coming to the event. We did have conversations with newsroom executives about hiring, but we didn't go to the level that I thought we could have gone to for a whole bunch of reasons. They were sympathetic, but in terms of their actions, it really didn't speak volumes. Interestingly enough, though, at one point at the Toronto Star, there were as many as 7 or 9 Black journalists at the Toronto Star, which is unheard of. When I went to the Toronto Star in 1981, I was the only Black reporter in that newsroom at 1 Yonge Street. And with it came a lot of interesting dynamics, let me tell you. And so it was a huge leap in terms of the number of Black journalists at the newspaper, at Toronto Star, for example. And there were other, sprinkling here and there, but there was some support from the senior leaders within these news organizations, but not nearly the level of support that I think that they should have given us, not nearly.
Mm-hmm. I remember a little differently, I think just because my head was down and I wanted, my focus was really bringing people together and being there as role models and helping those who are interested in careers in journalism. Either they were already in school or they were looking, and maybe be interested in this as a career. And so I did not work in the newsroom. I did not work in news journalism. And so my experience was more just focused on building the CABJ, and creating opportunities for networking and education and fundraising and doing things that would just have that safe space for Black journalists and students and those interested in journalism, whether it be broadcast, print, or communications, PR. And so to me, that's what, that was a big part of it. I think the advocacy part definitely grew as we grew. When the NABJ came, we went, there was a contingent of us that went to City TV, that went to, I remember a very meaningful conversation at the Toronto Star around advocacy, around hiring, and creating those relationships. So I think that for me, there was twofold. It was outside of our community, the advocacy, but also within our community, the advocacy and the support that I thought the CABJ was very, very instrumental in creating. And also, I think now that, the new CABJ, as we'll call it, is back.
Yeah.
I think more than ever, there was that gap. I was very disappointed when we didn't, continue, because I think that there was always a need for the CABJ. There was never a time when we didn't need to have an organization like the CABJ to be there within the greater community. It's a resource. I always saw it as a resource for our entire community. And so I'm really happy to see, Nadia, you get out there and you push to forward this agenda, and so that people can reconnect again, both the old, the people who were involved in the first CABJ version and the ones who are now taking the torch.
And to your point, Angela, I think I should jump in as well. You are right. I mean, there were some senior media executives in the newspaper that were very supportive of CABJ. I'm thinking specifically of someone like John Miller, for example, at the Toronto Star. He was a senior editor there. And John Miller was very, very supportive. John Miller eventually became the head of the School of Journalism at Ryerson. And he was very, very supportive of Black journalists, of inclusive journalism, and he really pushed for that. And there were a number of other people as well that were there. But it took a lot of work. The advocacy piece was always an important part of the CABJ. Beyond just celebrating excellence, we knew that we had to advocate as well. And you cannot just do one. It's one thing to celebrate and to have a network for Black journalists in this country, but someone also need to advocate on behalf of these journalists, even though when they believe that they don't need advocacy work done. I think there needs to be a voice for that. And so I think we're able to do both, not as effectively as I think many of us would have liked because of resources and time. We're working, and you sort of do it off the edge of your desk, late at night, things like that. But there was a passion for everybody who was involved in it at the time.
Mm-hmm. Hamlin, when I first got in touch with you to talk about this panel, the first thing you said to me was, it feels like Groundhog Day.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It does kind of feel like Groundhog Day. Here we go again, the same issues that we were dealing with back in the day are those same issues that we're talking about today. Lack of representation, lack of inclusive coverage, misunderstanding, intolerance, racism, the comments that journalists can make and write and think that this is okay. It was happening back then, it's happening again. And it is one of those things that just never seems to go away. That's why, to Angela's point, there's always going to be a place for the CABJ. And it's not just about Black people. It's about creating, it's about the craft of journalism. All of us, whether we're Black or white or South Asian or Asian, we live by the creed, of what journalism is all about, don't we? Fair, accurate, and balanced reporting. How can you do that if you're not representing and reflecting all of Canada to Canadians? That was the thing that we talked about, and that's the thing that we felt that we needed to change. And so, it's not just about being Black; it's about being better journalists, and we always talk about that. In fact, one of our raison d'etre and our mission was celebrating journalism excellence. That's what it was all about. But also advocating for people who felt that they didn't have a voice in this industry. And so we've done both things,
I want to bring in Michelle and Morgan now as we kind of head into those middle years, I guess, of the CABJ and talking about celebrating excellence and advocacy. How much of your involvement with the CABJ, I guess, what ended up being more of the focus? Was it about getting people through the door, or was it still heavily on that advocacy side, or just networking?
Well, at the time that I participated, there was a call for, I think the CABJ was relaunching at that time. And Morgan, I think that's probably where we met at that relaunch.
Absolutely.
Yes, we met at that relaunch. So it was in Scarborough, and they were, I can't remember who had sent out the notification, but I participated, and they were looking to relaunch the board at that time. And that's where it started. So in terms of getting things back to, a point where we could actually start moving and moving forward. I was working in broadcasting at the time, and Morgan can speak. He was at the Toronto Star. A group of us got together and started to reestablish the hard work that both Hamlin and Angela had put into the CABJ, and you know, not necessarily being part of that history myself, but certainly respecting the vision and, you know, the necessity to have representation in the media. And certainly I saw that in my workplaces where I, you know, worked at CBC as well as Rogers, and didn't see people like me. I was one of those people. I didn't see myself reflected for the role that I wanted at some point, and felt very passionate to also help others see themselves, but also give them opportunities to be seen or to do the work, whether that was through whatever activities they wanted to do. And we talked about all the different areas of journalism that you can cover. So in terms of starting at that time, the role was really to restart as much as with what we had, but also sort of expand and really reach out to as much of Canada as we could. And Morgan, feel free to jump in if I know you were definitely a great hand in terms of the print side and understanding that side. So how do you remember?
I mean, what I remember was a lot of, you know, there's just a lot of inertia, right? Because the organization had been dormant for a few years. Mm-hmm. And if you remember, like, one of the things we were wrestling with was whether to just remain the CABJ or to become a chapter of the NABJ. Yeah. You know, and dealing with the pros and cons of doing that. And this is one of these things that came up a couple of times. Like when we first started, there was talk about doing that, like back in 2007. And then you remember, like in 2010, because, you know, those of you who have American friends or American relatives, like, you know, everyone by this point knows about Caravana, right? So in Black America, there's this idea that Toronto's this great place to go and party, right? And if you've been to the NABJ convention, you know it's a big party. And the NABJ wanted to have a convention here in Toronto, you know, but they need a local chapter to organize things. So they reached out to us at the CABJ. And actually,
we went. I went there.
Did we reached it? Yes. Because you went there in 2010. You went to San Diego. Yes.
2009.
Yes.
I went.
Okay. Perfect.
I wanted some insight to kind of figure out how to do this, and that's when they heard they were interested about Toronto. They learned they wanted to know more, and then that's when we started the conversations in 2009.
But here's the point I wanted to make. Related to that, directly related to that, was that we at the CABJ knew that each of these outlets needed to do a better job of hiring Black people, not just as interns, but making contact with the mid-career Black professionals. Like they always, when they need a white veteran, they always know where to find a white veteran, but never where to find a Black veteran. And this, to your point, Hamlin, like at the Toronto Star where I was working, there were no more John Millers, right? John Miller had moved on. When I first got to the Toronto Star, there, Sharon Burnside was the assistant managing editor of, I think it was Development and Diversity, something like that. But diversity was in her job description. She was gone. They didn't have anyone looking out over that. And the thing is, like, we're in this moment right now. I'm sure every single person on this panel, your phone is ringing off the hook. White people want to talk to you. White people want your opinion. White people want you to teach them how to be less racist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And as I was writing in the Star last week, hey man, that's cool, but let's see how y'all feel in 6 months. Will you still remember where to find us? You know, when it's time to promote somebody, when it's time to really make decisions. I digress. So what happens in 2010 is that the NABJ's leadership comes to Toronto because they're thinking about having the convention here. And here's the thing. So we at the CABJ, clearly we cared. NABJ, they cared. The city of Toronto found all this money. Remember how poor the city of Toronto always says they are, but like they found all kinds of money to wine and dine these NABJ people because they wanted this convention to come here. So everybody knew how important it was to establish good relationships with local Black journalists and international Black journalists. Everybody knew except the people running newsrooms in Toronto, because the NABJ Brain Trust
Yeah.
Did the tour, went to every single newsroom in Toronto. And every single newsroom was the same thing. Not a single place bothered to send a senior executive to this meeting with NABJ leadership, right? Everybody would just send, you know, the business editor or whoever. Or what we did at the Star was they just emailed all the Black people. And when that wasn't enough, they emailed all the Asians, like including interns, including people who worked in the radio room, to come and sit there in this meeting with NABJ leadership to make the newsroom appear more diverse than it was. So we're almost 10 years beyond that. And what I'm eager to see, because like I said, everybody knows where to find us right now. What I'm eager to see is, and Natty, you said there are some VP level folks on this Zoom call. Listen, good for them, and I'm glad you're here. What I would like to see, what I'm eager to see is, again, what's going to happen 6 months from now when this is not the story of the day? Are the decision maker class of people going to change their habits right now? Or are they going to fall back into old habits once all this Black stuff leaves the front page, leaves the Black line? And I don't know, it's kind of an indirect way of answering your question, but the point is, like, a lot of the stuff we were trying to fight for 10 years ago, it's like we're on a treadmill and we're running and running and running and not getting anywhere. So I hope to see that we get somewhere.
And I just want to add
Groundhog
to that.
Day, yeah.
Yes.
I just want to add to that, like, some of the things as well in terms of reaching out across Canada, because I think that was one of the things that being in Toronto and that we talked about this, Nadia, as
Correct.
well, in terms of where we sort of were able to, where we stopped and where was the next stage to work on, was really reaching out to those journalists across Canada that really don't have that access to, you know, the central pool that is Toronto, or the central pool that might be Montreal, to at least come together. They might be out doing what journalists tell, you know, the you know, senior editors and everything tell people: go out to the far-flung places, do your work, come back, and then get the experience. So when you're that far-flung journalist in whatever part of Canada you want to be in, and you are the only one, and you don't have any support, and there's no one, that to me was very important to also kind of reach out and really make it across Canada as much as we could. And you know, I looked as many journalists and publications, media outlets to find those folks. I think we've done a relatively good job more recently with your work, Nadia, but that was certainly a focus as well.
And I want to come back to that point, because that was why I, you know, wanted to see the CABJ restarted. But Morgan, to pick up on some of the things that you were saying, you know, that in 6 months from now, this is not going to be a story, and any one of you can jump in on this. You know, I wonder if you feel like this kind of underscores the need for an organization that is specifically focused on Black journalism in this industry, just because I feel like this industry has proven that if there is nobody holding it accountable for diversity, for representation, then it's just going to, it can't hold itself accountable.
That is exactly it. Again, to Hamlin's point, like for a while there was the John Miller at the Star, for a while there was Sharon Burnside at the Star, but once they left, there was no one else coming up like them with that same emphasis on keeping the newsroom diverse. And when you don't have someone whose job is to keep the newsroom diverse, or who makes it their business to keep the newsroom diverse, what you have is what we've had in a lot of shops in this country, which is
gaps.
Well, yes, and the way that it's worked, like in my last few years at the Star, is that interns, social media producers, people who are young and also in different job categories that don't make as much as journalists, don't make as much as columnists, those people, you can fill those roles with people of color. But when it comes to hiring a columnist, an investigative reporter, somebody like that, they will go outside the company. Even when they say they're broke, they'll go outside the company to find white people to slot into these roles. So it is imperative for the reason of hiring diversity. And again, because in these discussions I've had to the extent that newsroom managers will have these discussions with me, they will willfully conflate Black and intern, Black and student. We'd like to find more Black people, but you know, we go to Ryerson, we can't find any. Well, Have you looked any place other than Ryerson? I don't know. Also, finding interns is one thing. Again, finding mid-career veterans who can do the job is something else. And, you know, these companies have just been falling short on both fronts. And so that's one thing. But then the second very vital role of a CABJ and an NABJ is to function as like a union. If you're in a union shop, they're your second union. To not always diffuse, but to advocate for Black people in times of conflict. Like, look what's happening with Kayla Gray. Look at this Hal Johnson's drama that he just made public today. You know, the role of a CABJ or an NABJ really is to take, or can be, to take the pressure off the individual in that situation. So Kayla, you know, has a lot of support amongst the community, like among this network of journalists, but like a CABJ or an NABJ can also come in and say, hey, look, you all have done this to her. We understand there's a problem, but your beef now is not with this individual. Your beef is with us. We're going to settle this. So that and empower people to speak up. Yes.
You know, you're making some interesting points here. And I remember having a conversation with a Black journalist, and she told me that she deliberately left off. She was a member of the CABJ.
Mm-hmm.
She deliberately left off her membership of the CABJ off her resume.
Wow.
When she would apply for jobs, and I can understand that. I can understand that because when I was headhunted really by the CBC in Ottawa from Global Television, I remember being in an interview board, and they saw I was always proud of putting my involvement with Black organizations on my resume. You know, all the time it was there, community involvement, because I think it's really important for journalists to be involved in their community. Really important. And I don't care whether or not you're involved with your church community or the Boy Scouts or whatever. Those are all part of who we are as people. And I think journalists need to be involved in their community. We're not these empty vessels. And it was interesting to have this particular person around the table, 5 individuals, say to me, I see that you're quite involved in the Black community. I see you're a member of this organization, or you're a volunteer. I said, yes, I am. And you know, the question for that person was, how objective do you think you would be covering the Black community? And there was silence around that table, just silence around that table. And I was kind of waiting for it because I had an answer. All right. And I kind of leaned back, look at him, look at everybody. Everybody sort of leaned back now to see what the answer is going to be. And I kind of leaned in and I said, well, you'll notice on my resume, I am also on the board of advisory governors for the YMCA of Greater Toronto. I've been doing that for a number of years as a volunteer. I think I can cover the YMCA quite objectively as a journalist. And I think I can cover our community quite objectively. In fact, it's an asset because I know the community. And it was like, okay. He said, well, and then he got very defensive. Not what I meant was this. I said, no, it's okay. So I can understand that. I can understand that. Yeah. People be afraid, uncomfortable sometimes to declare their involvement in the CABJ. And they need support. That's the reason why the CABJ needs to exist, to take some of that heat off of those individuals.
Exactly.
Okay. And because I've seen it happen. Yeah.
And I will say that we have heard that, from the folks currently on the board who do feel strongly about that, that
Really?
our advocacy role, especially nowadays, is so important. We also haven't been silent on the Kayla Gray front. That one was not a public statement, but we have reached out to TSN to let them know that we are, we have reached out to let them know that we are watching and that we want them to, I can share the note that we sent to them, but we made it clear that we're watching what they do in this incident. And I think, like to keep up with the number of statements that really are required, to be sent out to let this industry know that, the way that you've been treating Black journalists all along, this has to stop. And so we do see our role with the CABJ, we see advocacy as a big part of that. But as all of you point out, it is a lot of work. It is a lot of work, and that's part of the reason why we're looking at, restructuring the organization, getting it to the point where it is not something that people have to do off of the side of their desks anymore, but it can be, we can get charitable status, we can become an organization with membership, with a board, even maybe with a small staff that is
great.
able to.
That was always my wish. I always thought the CABJ needed an executive director of some sort, even a part-time executive director, to do the day-to-day functioning of an organization. That's what was missing, because it was a very, very much a challenge for all of us to do the work. It's great.
Yeah, and that's basically what I heard from all of you. That the work is necessary, but it's work. It's a lot of work. So I'll just quickly share, how I came about the CABJ and get into where we are now, and get back to all of you as panelists, just to get your thoughts. And for those of you who are watching, we do want to hear your questions. So go ahead and pop them in the Q&A section if you have them. Now's a good time. So I was born and raised in Toronto, but my first job was at CBC in Newfoundland. I moved out there in 2010, spent 2.5 years out there doing television and radio. And I remember when I moved out there, from the city, never lived anywhere except for Toronto. And I had this experience one day where I was walking to the CBC, and there were these 2 white girls walking in front of me. And one of them looked back and said, "Oh, look, and she called me the N-word. And then her friend, tried to silence her, and she said, "Oh, no, I call them all the N-word." And that was I think a turning point. Yeah, that was a turning point for me there. And I just remember feeling like I need somebody. I need to talk to another Black journalist. I need some kind of support. I need somebody that I can reach out to and talk to. I need some help because this is not easy. And so that's really what I felt. That's when I felt like, okay, I need to see the CABJ. And I'd known about it growing up, going through school. I'd known about the organization and going through university. And so I thought, okay, well, let me see what I can do to get in touch with the former president. But at the time, found out that it was on hiatus. And so, I just kind of kept on keeping on for the next 6 years until I found myself in Alberta. And at that point, I went down to the NABJ conference in Washington at the time, and I ran into Sasha Ann Simons, which some of you will probably remember her. Now she works down in the U.S. I think she works for public radio down in the
she's
U.S.
the NPR.
Yes.
Yeah.
There you go. And
IA.
Okay.
And
so we met in Washington at that conference, and she said to me, "You know what? Michelle Lynch would probably love to hear from you. You should reach out to her, and she'll help you get this thing back up and running." And so sure enough, I got in touch with Michelle, and at the time, Adrian Harewood from CBC Ottawa, he was also at the conference that year. And the 3 of us just began these really early conversations about, okay, how do we do this? How do we get this up and running? We need something, again, like the NABJ here in Canada. And convened a team of journalists. At the time, it was mostly from the CBC, to get the organization restarted, relaunched in 2018, and it's just been nothing but work, really, ever since then. Forming the team, getting everything, organized, and I feel like we were fairly prepared in terms of, we had a structure, we had a team, we had everything in place, so that when everything that's happened over the last 2 weeks, when it hit, we had the people, we had the structure, we had everything in place to be able to maneuver pretty quickly. But what has become clear is the need for an organization that is not going to hit that same bump, that road bump that this organization has hit in the past, where it then led to a lapse in leadership. We have been inundated with donations, and for any of you who are on the call tonight, if you've made a donation, thank you so much. We are up over $23,000 in donations, totally unsolicited. and very much appreciative of all the money that people have given. And then from an executive and a board level, we are looking at how best to manage that and what to do next with that, and also looking at sustainable funding and how do we as an organization acquire those kinds of grants and stuff like that to keep some kind of consistency in terms of the operation of the organization. And this comes back to applying for charity status, which is something that we are pretty close to doing. There's a new member on our team, fairly new member on our team, Julie Sobowale, freelance journalist, but also a lawyer who is based out in Regina. And so she's been instrumental in helping with that process, making sure that moves forward. So that's definitely the next step, to get the CABJ to charitable status, and then to that point where there is kind of that stable team that will always keep this organization going and growing, because I feel like in the future, an organization like this, especially as we grow, we talk about getting more Black journalists into newsrooms, or from our perspective from the CABJ, getting more Black journalists just doing their own thing. There isn't necessarily a need for another generation of Black storytellers, Black journalists to pass through the newsroom. There are platforms that they can build on their own. There are means that they can tell their own stories. So I personally, I'm not necessarily convinced that another generation has to go through the newsroom in the way that we did, but rather can be, the next 5 Blacks, can be the next, Camille and Roger Dundas, and as much as we can, replicate that model, and as Camille says, build up the Black media empire. That is, definitely something that we're here for. And so I definitely want to come back to, oh, actually, wait, we have one question before I get to the room. Somebody just asked, is there even any chance at all for internationally trained journalists and media professionals in Canada, or should we start changing our profession right now? And that has always been a problem for internationally trained journalists. They come to Canada, and I've met so many African journalists, and because my husband is African, of course, I meet a lot of people from the African community, but so many African journalists who come here, and all of their experience is just dismissed, completely dismissed. I don't know if this is something that the former executive also encountered.
Yeah, I was going to say, I do recall a few journalists, and some of them actually, especially for the Quebec market, come with, they're bilingual, and that's really one of the things that is most beneficial. But they have struggled, and they have reached out, and they've wanted to look for opportunities and how to find it. And same was the case when I went to the US for the NABJ conferences, that often they would go there. And I think NABJ also, I guess, was still looking at, I think they've evolved since then, but they were looking at ways to incorporate more of an international view to their organization to spread out. I think they've more or less done that now, but at the time it's hard for internationally trained, but certainly, especially with Canada being bilingual and a lot of the African nations having French as the second language, I think it's definitely a win for ones that are looking for support and diversity in their newsrooms or whatever platform.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I definitely think there's an opportunity here for the CABJ to continue to expand its base, especially with international and trained journalists. And I'm really encouraged by that. The CABJ, I know we talked about the NABJ wanting the CABJ to become a chapter of the NABJ, and I was really against that. And becoming a chapter of the NABJ came with it a whole bunch of stuff that a lot of us simply were not comfortable with. I just felt that Canada cannot be seen as a chapter. We are a separate country. If there's anything, there should be chapters of the CABJ in different provinces. That's what I was thinking. And at the time, the NABJ was looking to be more international, and the CABJ was going to be the beginning of that internationalization of the NABJ. Okay, then early days, and it didn't go anywhere. But that whole notion of the internationalization of the NABJ and the CABJ coming together, that's very much on the table. I think we need to accelerate that membership piece in reaching out to internationally trained journalists. from the continent and elsewhere, because I think that's just a benefit for us as well.
So on our board, we also do have Sarah Glover, who is the former president of the NABJ, and who has been just, very and very much, instrumental in helping us as we've been relaunching. And somebody, Nicole Brewster, just asked, has the CABJ connected with the Ida B. Wells Society in the US? We have. I think we connected with them a while ago, but that kind of fell off. So I do have to get in touch with their people again, because we connected. I think the last time we connected was at one of the NABJ conferences. Was the last time I chatted with those folks again. But some time has passed there. And that is a great society actually to partner with, to work with on future projects. The NABJ, including now under Dorothy Tucker's leadership, has been supportive of us, of the work that we've been doing. We have been in communication with them, not in recent weeks since everything has gotten just so hectic. But I think just since the beginning of this year, when we released the calls to action, we were in touch with the NABJ, and they've always been super supportive.
It's great.
We did as well when we were relaunching, and Morgan, you and I talked about this. Looking at making this. Should the CABJ just be a chapter of the NABJ? What does relaunching look like? And in the end, the team that was part of the relaunch felt strongly that it needed to still be the CABJ, but if we could get to a place where maybe there was some kind of MOU between us and the NABJ in terms of our work.
There has to be. Absolutely.
Sharing resources.
Yeah.
So this is, go ahead.
Listen, Canadian pride and all that, yes. I'm also a dual citizen. My parents are American. And one of the things that Canadians would be better off just accepting is that Canada is a suburb of the United States, right? Mississauga is not Toronto, but Mississauga is a suburb of Toronto. And the better the relationship the CABJ has with the NABJ, more effective everyone can be. Like, I just finished reading They Call Me George, right, by Cecil Foster.
Yeah.
And detailing the history of sleeping car porters in this country. And now if the Black sleeping car porters in Canada had said, well, we're Canadian, we're different from the US, we're gonna stand apart from the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, I don't know how much progress they would have made on their campaigns. But when they partnered with the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, now you have beef in Canada. Again, your beef is not just with these guys in Toronto. Now you got to deal with A. Philip Randolph and all of these other people. So whether or not CABJ becomes a chapter is one thing, but there, for me, definitely should be like some type of formal arrangement, a partnership, some type of mechanism whereby if some shit goes down, sorry to swear, but like CABJ can call on NABJ and NABJ will have our back 100%.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I think there needs to be partnership, and but I think we also need to understand that our experience as black people in this country, there are some differences in terms of how we engage, because a lot of black people, a lot of African Canadians, they have a Caribbean root as well. There are a lot of issues that I think we need to look at. In terms of a partnership with NABJ, absolutely. I've just never felt that the CABJ just simply be a chapter of the NABJ. We needed our own identity as an organization that speaks to Canadian issues that affect Black and African Canadians in this country. Whereas the NABJ, when you're a suburb, the big city doesn't think you're all that important. Okay, but I think in terms of having a relationship with the NABJ, absolutely, we'd be silly not to have that connection with the NABJ. But we need to be very clear in terms of our autonomy from the NABJ, because we do have our own issues and our own way of doing things in this country, and issues that we need to deal with.
The thing is that like I had mentioned earlier, is that we've always had a relationship with the NABJ.
Yeah.
So even though we made a decision to not be a chapter, they have always been, at least my experience, been very supportive and very generous. So for example, informal, partnerships and treating us like we were, like I remember we had one convention, we would treat the NAB convention like our convention, you know, like we would, you know, take advantage of the opportunity to go down there and have, you know, our members be trained and to network. And one year, I believe it was 1997, we took a bus of CABJ members down to the convention in Chicago, and we had like over 40 members at the convention that year. And it was great, and we already had the relationships. Like I said, you know, we had NABJ representation at our launch events, and so it was always, you know, keeping those president to president, you know, relationships, and it was more about us. They were always available to us. It was more about when we could reach out to them for support when we needed it. So I don't think that it's a matter of us not being able to, or our issues not, you know, taking precedent. That's up to us. That's up to the CABJ. But the things we're more alike than we're different. And so the things where we could get their support on, it would only make sense. I mean, we can do more together. Yeah. And again, they were always generous in treating us like all of our members that went to the CABJ. I don't know if you've taken advantage of that, but when I was president, I made sure that all of our members, when they went to the convention, got the NABJ convention rate. So they got to pay what an NABJ member would have paid, opposed to one who wasn't. So those are the types of things that, it was very much, they were a resource, and they saw us as, you know, something that would perhaps allow them to expand on a global level.
And we did have that same conversation with the NABJ this year, but just with everything that happened with their conference being moved online and you know, that whole thing. Yeah, I just don't think people would have taken them up on that. But yes, Angela, you know, that I'm grateful that relationship had already been established, because it really did make it easier to have that conversation with Sarah Glover, who at the time wasn't even president when you guys were working with her.
No,
I think I met her. No, she wasn't. It was Kathy Times, I believe, and then you know, evolved to I think it was right after Morgan, correct me, but I know Sarah Glover was certainly part of the board at that time. So she was very interested in participating and seeing more of that international perspective, and actually came to Toronto just on her own, and that definitely helped to at least garner some interest to help. So.
So one of the things that we've been hearing from Black journalists, especially young Black journalists, and for me being outside of Toronto and spending most of my career outside of Toronto, is the need for mentoring, the need for somebody to just, you know, kind of give that advice and be available. And so I wonder if former generations of the CABJ also heard the same thing, and how you supported young Black journalists and even mid-career journalists as well.
Well, from my time at Rogers, I was the volunteer coordinator there for a number of years, and you know, being close to Toronto, it was like one of the only places that people could actually get that hands-on experience at the time to train in their craft. And I certainly, if I saw somebody that was, you know, Black, that, you know, had a great passion to do the work, and make sure that they knew about those opportunities, that they at least got the experience. Many of them are currently reporting on various stations today, or writing, but at least, you know, that was the small thing that I could do that would be able to give them some practical experience, and try to mentor them in, as far as I could, with what they needed to know to sort of succeed. A lot of them might not have said that, you know, they would want to travel outside of Toronto because they wanted a job in the city, but you know, the going plan is that you have to kind of go outside to come back. And a lot of them that took that advice, they did it. They went to those areas that might not have been comfortable for them to be in. And as Nadia spoke to her situation, definitely socially uncomfortable to have to be called that as soon as you land in a place that's your home. I mean, Canada is our home, and we shouldn't be called that in any sphere at all. But that is the work that people have to do to decide to go outside of Toronto. They actually have to make a conscious effort that I'm going to go somewhere away from my home for one, and then on top of that, I'm going to probably be the only journalist trying to train to, practice my craft, whatever that is. And that may be for a couple of years, and it can be very difficult. So those that did it, I think they were successful and they've come back to Toronto, but I'm sure there are many that choose not to for the same reason. And maybe they're probably missing from our sphere of, talented potential journalists, because maybe they didn't feel that they could do that. And at least that was the area that I could support for a number of years.
And that's one of the reasons why we also did the scholarship.
Yeah.
There are two scholarships that we started at the CABJ. One for a female student named after Marianne Chad, and then the other one for a male journalism student named after Al Hamilton, who was the founder and of a Contrast newspaper. We weren't able to give a lot of money for that scholarship. It could have been maybe, I think it may have got to as high as $1,000 or something. But it helped, and it was something that we could certainly build upon. Mentoring is always a challenge. What we found was that after a while, the CABJ membership, rather than attracting the so-called veterans, the people who've been in the business for a long time, we're attracting more and more students, and the veterans, it was like an "I'm okay, you're okay" syndrome. They were satisfied, they were okay, they had jobs, and it was really hard to get many of them to really get engaged in the association. Whereas students, they were starving, just starving for help, starving for mentoring, starving to any kind of networking to get them into this business. And a lot of these Black journalists who are now established in the media, who've sort of made their way. I hate to say it, some of our brothers, man, they forgot where they came from. I hate to say it, and they didn't reach back as much as they should have. I like to think that's going to change, and we need to reach back and help some of these students who want to come into the business, because if they're not okay, you're not okay. That's how I looked at it, So I'm hoping we can do more of that.
Morgan, how do you think we find the balance between reaching back and helping, but not overburdening the senior Black journalists?
Oh man, all of us need mentors. Like the reason I got in at the Toronto Star is because I had Ashanti infantry pulling for me. Like she walked me. So basically, she had done a story. This is like 21 years ago. Ashanti had done a story on my sister. My sister was still is an opera singer. She's in Chicago now, but she was in Toronto. And so Ashanti comes and interviews my sister. They get to talking. And my sister says, "Oh, my brother's getting ready to finish journalism school." And Ashanti's like, "Oh, is he any good?" My sister's like, "Yeah, he's good." She put me in touch with Ashanti. So the next time I was in Toronto, Ashanti brings me downtown and introduces me to Sharon Burnside. And then like a summer after that, I applied for this internship, and I got the internship because, they knew who I was. And that is like 99% of it is, do the decision makers know who you are? Mm-hmm. And so I certainly tried to do that when I was like in the day-to-day news industry. And I still, and for me, it's a matter of like making time. Like right now I'm super busy, but I make time to talk to students, not as much, and like younger people trying to get, not as much as I would like to, but because time is finite. And part of it too is figuring out like what the purpose of the mentorship is. Like I'm always happy to talk to people about writing and making their writing better, et cetera, et cetera. Right at this particular moment in time, I have people, and Natty, I'm gonna forward you some stuff. Editors hit me up saying, "Hey, do you know anyone who could fill these jobs because we're hiring?" Like this, this is just in the last couple of days since people have decided to care about Black people. White people decided to care about Black people. But like when things are normal, like I learned, at least as far as the Star was concerned, like I was not the Black person they were going to listen to when it came to recommending really good people. Like I had a guy from Mississauga, went to Brown University undergrad, that's Ivy League, Went to Northwestern University grad school, got a journalism degree, internships at the Providence Journal, all these places. I brought him to the office, had him interview with different editors. This cat still couldn't get an internship. And then when I looked at like the resumes of the people that they hired that year for year-long internships, like it wasn't even like, it did not compare at all, except that this was past the days of John Miller, past the days of Sharon Burnside. The people doing the hiring weren't really checking for Black people like that. So it really didn't matter how good you were and how much better your resume was than the white people's resume. And this is a guy that, but the thing is, you know, he went from there to like the oil and gas industry. He lives in Houston now. He's making all kinds of money. So like, you're not going to get him back.
You know,
right?
you know, that's a great ending to the story. But you know, so many of our people, though, you know, they left the business.
Yes.
You know, many of them went into PR because they just couldn't get a job. You know, in the place that they had their first passion. You know, I know so many people like that. Just went into communications as opposed to into journalism, and these were smart, bright people. You know, and it was so sad to see it. You know, I don't know if you had the same experience, Angela. Did you hear the old stories like that of people just sort of walked away and just left it, you know, because of that?
I'm sure. I mean, nothing stands out, you know.
Okay. Yeah.
But what I do want to say is that I think that, you know, CABJ launched 1996. What is that? 24 years ago? A long time ago.
Wow. Yeah.
And I think a lot has changed as well. And I think that the new CABJ needs to definitely be a lot more inclusive to what, you know, what is communications and journalism nowadays, you know, and that I think that being able to include, you know, social media, people who are, have built their own amazing YouTube channels, definitely corporate communications. They were already traditionally part of CABJ, but really looking at how all of these are different voices that can be advocated for, you know, by the CABJ, but also can be a resource, a pool of professionals that when it comes to mainstream publications, mainstream companies, and so on that are interested in and committed to leveling the playing field, you know, and committed to having representation in their companies because they know the value that it brings to the product that they deliver. That they have a resource that they can come to CABJ and they can work with us to find people who are suitable for the positions that they want to fill. Because I think everybody that's on this call is very aware and probably in agreement in how much better we as a society will be when our companies and our newsrooms and, you know, are representative of the society in which, you know, we live, and that people's voices are very important, and they are having diversified voices, you know, just creates the opportunity for what I think we're all striving for, which is a harmonious, you know, way of living and having peace of mind and knowing that there's a just, you know, a just way of having things created, especially communicated, and stories being told. Like everybody has stories, and so to leave out these voices, especially in communications and media, is just to the detriment of all of us.
Yeah, I agree.
So just to pick up on your point, Angela, like right now with everything that's going on, some of the people that are in PR that are making these messages about Black Lives Matter, I'm not sure that they actually have a good insight as to how to communicate to us in this very present moment. And to your point, Angela, I think this is where, you know, we have transitioned and communications is different. And I'm sure many of those people are not people of color, because I think some of the messages might have been a bit tone deaf, if we could say that.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I mean, I'm being polite and saying that, but you know, frankly, like, you know, they're not really reaching the moment as they should be, and they're retracting. So
good point.
I think of one particular organization, Code Black, that we have been connected with, and Code Black is a nonprofit, and they deal more with Black communicators, folks in PR and communication. So we've connected with them just by coincidence. One of the co-founders of Code Black is somebody that I went to school with. So we go way back. But in talking about where the CABJ goes from here and this moment in time, just really quickly about the work that we're doing now. So probably many of you who are on the call have heard about CJOC, if you're not part of their Facebook group already. CJOC, Canadian Journalists of Color. We are working with them. There's no formal announcement yet, but we are working with them on a project, specifically on a conference about journalists, about diversity, focused on journalism and journalists of color and newsroom leadership. And so we'll be that'll be coming forward soon. I'll be honest, one of my big dreams for the CABJ is to host the NABJ here in Toronto. To host an NABJ conference in Toronto, I think would be
be
amazing for the CABJ. So that is a dream of mine and something that I hope in the years to come to be able to work with our current team and NABJ leadership to make that happen. Because if anybody has ever been to an NABJ conference, you know that it is it's an amazing experience. There's something about being in a room with about 3,000 other Black journalists that just revives your soul in a way, in a way that is pretty unique.
Yeah, it's palpable, isn't it? It's palpable.
Yeah.
Just being, the energy. Yeah, I know. It's crazy.
Yeah. And the people that they manage to attract. Yeah, go ahead, Angela.
Like in the meantime, I think that being able to, create the opportunity for CABJ members to go down to the convention every year and having a presence every year would definitely help, I think, to support that goal. And if there's anything I can do to help, let me know. But I think that when is the next one? Or where? Okay,
It's
online.
Going virtual.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's gone virtual.
Following one because they usually know a few years in advance.
I think it is on their website, but I can't recall off the top of my head. Some of them are closer up, and they've repeated some cities recently. So
yeah, and this one, so if I'm not mistaken, this year it was supposed to be in Washington.
Yeah,
but had to go virtual instead. So we'll definitely be working with them and staying in touch with them. But in the meantime, that is one of the projects that we're working on. In addition, another project to support Black journalists who want to launch their own media platform, and we're hoping to make an announcement about that in the next couple of months. So working on that one. Along the lines of what many of you mentioned, and you as well, Morgan, we are getting approached by so many different, organizations who want to set up scholarships and internships and fellowships and different things. So from the leadership perspective, it's a matter of having those conversations, looking through them. Internships and scholarships are great. But I feel like Black journalists are much farther beyond that. And so if this is all that we're talking about in terms of solutions,
this is what I'm saying.
That's concerning for me.
Yeah.
So
and they use Black and student and Black and intern as if they're interchangeable, and as if we're not all journalists trained to see through double talk, man. But
anyways.
Yes.
But anyway. So there is that, and yes, there especially when we talk about scholarships, yes, there is a need for Black youth who want to get into journalism, or making sure that there's funding available. But it's just when all of the solutions are pointing that way, that's the concern. So sifting through all of that, and there are newsrooms as well that have reached out to the CABJ to have conversations with them about how they move forward from here. And so for us, this is really about accountability. Anybody that we are having conversations with now, we're holding them to their word. Everybody was so quick to release a statement. And that's why we put out our statement saying, your words don't really hold water for us. I'm just looking at Nicole Barister's comment in the room, and she's saying that it's extremely important to ensure the doors are open for new journalists. I also think retention is critical in our newsroom. Yes, retention is critical, and retention speaks to culture, because it's the culture in in these newsrooms all across the country that's just terrible.
Yeah.
And seeing more Black journalists in leadership and senior key positions. Yet, or else we'll have no influence. Totally agree with you, Nicole. And for us, those are the conversations that we are having. Yes, definitely. And Nicole, just to go back to, this is why we put that in the calls to action. I don't know if you saw the calls to action, but this is why we listed that specifically in the calls to action, the need for diversity in, and we co-released that document with CJOC. So we're talking about Black, Indigenous, and journalists of color, but the need, oh, no worries, but the need for diversity specifically in those leadership positions, because if all that we're doing is, sure, getting more young journalists of color in the newsroom, but it's not changing at the top, then nothing's changing.
Yeah,
and,
very true, very true.
You know, and that's, you know, that's our approach. But yes, again, coming back to what folks on the call have been saying, still being that strong voice for Black journalists, still being that advocate for Black journalists who are in newsrooms, and some of the conversations that I'm having, some of the things that I'm hearing, you know, those Black journalists who just feel like, you know, nobody's got their back. And so that's, for us, that's right now, you know, what we're here for and here to establish. In terms of membership, for any Black journalists who are on the call, yes, that is going to be reestablished. You know, one of the things we were talking about, and I don't know if this was, you know, something for the former executives, but is you want to be able to offer people something, especially when we talk about national membership. Like if you're all the way in Edmonton and you become a member, but events are only in Toronto, then what good is the membership for you? And so that is something that we have been looking at as we reestablish membership. What are the benefits, no matter where you are in the country, that you can take advantage of? And whether that is networking events or different opportunities. Angela, go ahead.
This is the thing too, even like probably how many years ago that, you know, at the time when NABJ came up here and we were talking about this was an opportunity to leverage that event to relaunch the CABJ, it was talking about the fact that we can do so much virtually. We couldn't do that in 1996. So you can live and be in Newfoundland and you can be doing more events online, webinars, you know, like opportunities to do something like this, a Zoom meeting. A veteran could, you know, be in their home and they could be part of a Zoom meeting, a webinar. I think that the virtual, like having access to this, I think is really what can make a big difference. Like it's not about always being in person and always, it's really about just being able to provide, you know, really great events online to pull people in the country together.
Yeah, connection and support is, and that's kind of what we're hearing from folks as well. And you know, Tiffany and Nicole, who are very active in our chat group tonight. So thanks to me and Nicole for weighing in. But yes, Nicole, your comment about the need for awards, that's something that David Thurton, who's on our board, has also spoken about, you know, the need to establish some kind of award for Black journalism and the work of Black journalists. So all of this in the works. I think, you know, speaking from the organization's perspective, our priority first and foremost right now is to focus on advocacy, on getting charity status, and then getting us to that place of just really stability once we get that stable funding in place, and rolling out some of the programs that have already been in the works. J School Noir is already launched, and we've seen, you know, some great success of that with kids over in Halifax, and that's been wonderful. But we really now need to focus on those mid-level and senior career journalists. And yes, if we can get back to, you know, some kind of in-person networking, I know that that's tough nowadays, but kind of along the lines of what Angela was saying, you know, doing that online for now. I don't know when we'll be having in-person events.
We can have bubbles, we know that much, but
you can have little bubbles.
Bubbles of people.
Bubbles of people.
Yeah.
But yes, Maggie, and to your point, you know, Maggie John says, I would also like to see more networking. I've reached out to veterans in the past and have not heard back. We need to learn from each other, and I totally agree. You know, we do need to learn from each other and make space for each other within this industry. So I guess just to wrap up, we've got only about 15 minutes left, but I'd love to hear from just, you know, from the panelists as we talk about this moment in time. And you know, Morgan, you've said everybody is paying attention to us now, and Hamlin, you know, your phone is ringing off the hook. So everybody is paying attention to Black journalists now, but you know, is this you know, a seminal moment? Where do we, as Black journalists, or as the industry, not so much us, but where does the industry go from here in terms of how it should be treating us?
Well, I can say one thing with regard to that. I think that what you'll see, what I've been seeing lately, is a lot of like knee-jerk reaction to what's going on. A lot of media outlets are going to see where their gaps are as a result of not being able to deliver, not having, you know, certain policies in place, or certain, like, say, manifestos in place that they know exactly where they stand. So I think holding organizations accountable, like when I look at Maclean's, when I look at Toronto Life, I think Toronto Life is actually, I personally have been in touch with someone there to express my disappointment in how they have responded to what's going on, as well as I said, I think I'd love to see you guys do an editorial audit, because I see a lot of the stories that come through Toronto Life and the narrative when it comes to the Black community, and it's a one-note story, and it's often stories that are connected to the criminal system in some way, whether it's policing, whether it's, you know, a story that just came out 2 months ago about someone who was a drug dealer who went to jail, who's now a lawyer, and, you know, it's like, I'm tired of seeing those stories. And so I said, what is your editorial team look like? You know, like, this is a city magazine that's supposed to represent one of the most diverse and multicultural cities in the world. And I would love to see what the editorial team looks like. And so I think that we need to hold, we need to like we talk about, like I know Morgan's saying, what about in 6 months? We need to hold them accountable. You know, it's not about what they're gonna give us or what they're gonna, it's like, what do we want? And what do we want from the place of knowing that it's gonna make a difference, you know? And I think that Toronto Life, I'm on this guy because I have, I've been a subscriber. I was in the Toronto Life Insider membership, and I was just like, it's not good enough. It's not. Like, if you want to call yourself Toronto Life and be a Toronto magazine, you need to do a lot better job. And if you go on their social media now, you'll see kind of a knee-jerk reaction to what's going on. Right? But if you go back a month and a half ago, it will look not at all representative of our city. And so these are the things I think that we all need to do, which is to continue to advocate just on behalf of what we know is right, so that organizations are doing the right thing. And just because, you know, no one's saying anything doesn't mean that, well, that doesn't mean that it's okay. And so I do have a little bee in my bonnet about Toronto Life and what I see as being definitely out of touch and tone deaf editorial, and also, you know, I think this is always, you know, fish rots from the head down. So I think overall, like, looking at all of their publications and seeing where there's opportunities to advocate for better representation, you know?
It's interesting you say that. Oh, I was going to add to what Angela said, because I had the same vision or the same thought recently online, seeing that, oh my goodness, all of a sudden I'm seeing Black faces on the online portion, but I often go to Toronto Life and I'm checking out the real estate section, and I never ever see anybody, any couple, any single person, anybody of any diversity, unless they're coupled with someone else who's white, in that particular section that I might go to in real estate. And I thought to myself, I know that there's more than that in the city. So Angela, we have the same bee in our bonnets for that, because every so often when I see it, it's the same idea that it's really not representative. So.
And it's not just publications like Toronto Life, you know, it's you know, it's also the large you know, these large networks, you know, and we need to start really asking some hardworking questions about the makeup of the management team, the leadership team within these organizations. Just Google any of these large companies and take a look at who is sitting in the senior management role. These are the people making decisions, and how conscious are they of this? So I think the CABJ, you really do have a role to at least start asking those questions and get. I think it's time for the CABJ to just make people feel uncomfortable. They've been sitting in their comfort for a long time. There's a window of opportunity here, and to Morgan's point, let's not miss this opportunity here to make people feel a little bit less comfortable in their comfort, and I think we're perfectly poised to do that right now. So anything I can do to make that happen, you got my number. You know how to reach me.
Morgan?
Yeah, I don't believe in like I don't believe in the sincerity and good faith long term of the white people that run these companies. Like, any of them are welcome to prove me wrong. But what I do know is that right now, for the next few weeks, next couple months maybe, they are all motivated to listen to Black people. And my habit change guru friends tell me that the best time to make a change in habit is when you are motivated. So that when the motivation wears off, the new good habit is there instead of the old bad habits. So yeah, if Black folks, either through an organization or loose collectives, like want to force decision makers at their shops to change their habits around hiring and promotion of Black folks and other non-white people, now's the time to do it, because right now they're listening. They might not be listening 6 months from now, but they'll be listening. They're listening right now. And then 6 months from now, even if they're not listening, they might have some different habits. So yeah, this is a very good time. And like mentorship, shit, I'm about to be like super busy for the next 12 months, but man, if anyone's on here, hit me up. Perry King might still be on this call. He can attest. For some reason, I'm better at answering Twitter DMs than any other type of communication. So there you go, at Morgan P. Campbell.
Thank you all. Thank you so much for your time. There was one more question about whether or not any of these organizations, these news organizations, have reached out to the CABJ to host workshops and newsrooms talking about diversity and racial issues and what have you. Some of these organizations have reached out to the CABJ. The answer is a big no to workshops and panels and, you know, most of that stuff, because I don't know how many unconscious bias training workshops can you go through? How many of these things can you do?
Yeah.
To us, you know, we just feel like this is just a Band-Aid solution. So we are not entertaining the conversation of hosting workshops in newsrooms right now. These are conversations with leadership about change, and it's a full stop. I think right there for us for now. Because if we continue going on this, around this,
training is done.
Yeah, the training is done.
It's time to pass the exam. It's at this point.
Yeah.
It's time to pass the exam. We're done with the training.
We're done with the training.
Yeah.
Let's get more than enough
exam
training.
time. Yeah,
and
that should be a T-shirt. That needs to be a T-shirt, Michelle. I like that.
I know. I've been saying it for a while because I know I've seen it on Twitter and all these other places, and I think to myself, how many times can you have the training? How many times can you? I mean, I only had 4 years to get through university, and I didn't get to keep going. So you had the training, and you finish, and you graduate, and you move on, and you get a job, and you do the next step. So if people are still asking for training, if they're still asking for how can I learn and what to ask, you need to go and do the homework. You need to figure out what you need to ask. The teachers are ready to teach you what you need to know, but the time for the exam is now. And there's no going back into remedial classes. We've done that. And I mean, Hamlin and Angela on this call are here to test to that. They've been here at this for 24 years plus. They're professors now at this point, and I think it's time to pass the exam.
We're done.
Yeah.
We're done with
done.
training. I very much appreciate the question. Thank you for asking. But yes, and if you go back to our statement that we released last Monday, we talk about that. There've been workshops, there've been training, there've been panels, there've been town halls, and we're still seeing the same on-air gaps. We're still seeing poor hiring. We're still seeing all this.
Silly mistakes as well, silly things. Not not deep stuff. It's like, it's surface stuff, like missing a period, and it's simple stuff. So
Yeah.
that should have already been learned by now.
Yeah, we are past that, which Shauna and Nicole both very much agree with. So thank you.
So make a T-shirt if you wish.
I love it. It should be a T-shirt. I love it.
Make it. Yeah, feel free.
Time to write the exam.
Time to write the exam. Limited time.
So
Okay.
I want to thank you all, Hamlin, Angela, Michelle, Morgan. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Yeah.
I appreciate you all so much, and I appreciate the fact that when I came knocking and looking for resources, all of you were there. So thank you for always being here. Thank you for founding this organization. Thank you for having that vision, Angela and Hamlin, and starting something that is alive today. And my hope is that this will be, I wouldn't say my hope, I'd say my purpose here in this organization is to make sure that we never have another relapse, that it is established to the point where it's here to stay, and that we are able to get this organization to a place where when we pass it on to the next generation of Black journalists, whom I have so much faith in, that they will just continue to take this organization to the next level. So thank you all. Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone who joined and was part of the conversation, for listening, for following on social media, for being a support. You know where to reach us, and we're always here to help you, and happy to help you.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
thank you all.
Thank you,
Nadia. Thank
Yeah.
you. For
All right,
you.
have a good one.
Yeah.
Take care,
Thank
everybody.
you. Okay.
Bye, everybody.
everyone.
All the best.
Good night.
Yes.
I know.
Good night. Yeah.
Bye.